Today we're taking a look at the meta to find out which decks are the best in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! What's potion? You got Matt here and welcome to another competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Video. YCS Rio is officially over. It was the first YCS since Legacy of Destruction and all the new archetypes that have been released, and it was a pretty big success, with the top 32 being made up of 11 different strategies, which is a pretty good indication of a diverse format. But there are still a few decks sitting at the top of the meta as the most dominant forces in the game today, and we're going to find out what those decks are right now. So if you're excited for the video, then make sure to smash the like button. If this video hits 300 likes, I'll bring you an awesome tier list with the 25 top meta decks to find out which ones are the best. Also, if you like competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Including deck profiles, guides on how to beat the best decks, meta discussions, and videos just like this one, you're gonna love this channel, so make sure to subscribe. But with that being said, here are the top 5 best meta decks for the May 2024 competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Format. Let's jump into it. So I made a top 5 best meta decks video right after the ban list dropped, which was only about 2 weeks ago, right before Legacy of Destruction's release. But I feel like since Legacy of Destruction released, we've had new archetypes come into the game that have drastically changed how we play Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now. But is it going to be enough to help us beat the dominant Snake Eye meta? But before I get to the top 5, I have 2 decks I wanted to shout out. The first one is going to be Melodious. Melodious is a strategy that has gotten new support from Legacy of Destruction and made the deck so much stronger than it once was. It's got a great engine that has taken the deck from being basically irrelevant into a potential top tier threat. Melodious has an E-Tally in first movement solo, and it also has a branded fusion in Ostinato as well. These 2 cards allow the deck to put up some massive end boards with really powerful engine and non-engine pieces. Cards like Flowering Etoile or Baka are going to be really powerful in the game today, and of course generic cards like Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon and SP Little Knight are really strong too. And the second deck I wanted to shout out today is going to be Runic Stun. Runic Stun is in a great position because it didn't really lose anything. Sure, they lost a card like Summon Limit, but honestly it doesn't really matter too much because there are so many great floodgates available for this strategy. And because you're playing runic cards, you're able to get both disruption and a lot of advantage as well. It'll be pretty common to go up against 1 or 2 stun players over the course of a long event because the deck is really solid in the format today, just not as good as it needs to be to crack the top 5. Speaking of which, let's move on to our top 5. Starting off with number 5 being Tenpai Dragon. I know this might be a bit of a surprise to a lot of people that Tenpai is not a top 3 meta deck. But the deck itself, while it is very good, it actually had the second highest representation of decks in the top 16 of YCS Rio, but it wasn't as good as we expected it to be. While the deck did perform well and have good representation in top 16, only 1 player with Tenpai Dragon made it to top 8, and that is a little unfortunate. The deck itself has quite a few different weaknesses that are really exploitable in the format today. First off, it really hates going first, and a lot of players, even if their side deck is not well equipped to handle Tenpai Dragon, they can just say, you know what, go first, if you heat wave me, you heat wave me, so be it, I'm going to try and break your board after that and OTK you before you get the chance. The second weakness for Tenpai Dragon is going to be the side deck. Side decking against Tenpai Dragon is incredibly easy. You slap in a couple dimensional barriers or a couple Symbol Archfiends and you should be in a really good position. Because most of the time you're going to be given the opportunity to go first, you can set up those cards and just end the game in an instant because they can't really do too much if those cards are active. I mean, sure, they can go for the Salamangreat Raging Phoenix OTK if you D-barrier at the wrong time, but if you have D-barrier, you're better off waiting until the battle phase to activate the card. Now, these 2 weaknesses don't really seem like much, but because of how common Tenpai Dragon is looking like it's going to be, we're going to see a lot more targeted cards against it. And because you're also giving your opponents the opportunity to go first to set up their board, it's going to require a lot more power to break through those boards, which you're not always going to get with this side deck. In my opinion, the current version of Tenpai Dragon can never be a top 3 meta deck for more than like 1 or 2 weekends at the most. The second it starts performing that well, players are going to respect it more and more and have even more hate potentially even in the main deck for that strategy. And because there are so many cards that are good against Tenpai Dragon that can shut down what it really wants to do, a lot of players are going to start siding those in and bring them to more events, which will make it less likely that Tenpai Dragon can top because in games 2 and 3 it'll be at a massive disadvantage. But I do want to say that even though Tenpai is not in my top 3, I do think it has potential to be one of the more successful decks of the format. But the second it starts seeing that success, we're going to see a drop off in its representation and its success level as well because more players are going to be ready for it in the format. I also believe we're going to be in a constant cycle of where the deck performs well and has a lot of representation, but then we're going to have side deck cards that are more commonly played to beat it, which will reduce the representation it has in future events and the success in those events as well. And then because no one's playing it anymore, it's not having much success, people will decide not to play these powerful blowouts against the strategy, and then it'll perform well again, and so on and so forth. And for those of you saying, oh well, in the OCG it's one of the best decks there as well, absolutely, I completely agree, but they also have Max C, which is a great card in Tenpai Dragon because it allows them to dig for all the non-engine they could possibly need to break any board and win a game. Tenpai may be at number 5, but I believe it has the highest potential of all the decks on this list other than number 1. In 4th place, I have Fire King Snake Eye. This deck I believe was going to be the best deck of the format post-ban list. And listen, everyone expected it didn't happen because Snake Eye is still crazy, and Fire King Snake Eye is no exception, but it's not as good as pure Snake Eye. But Fire King Snake Eye is still very strong and is definitely going to continue to top events over the course of the next format. Both the Snake Eye and Fire King engines are incredibly compact and very powerful and can offer different things that support each other very well. The deck has arguably a higher ceiling and a better end board than almost any deck in the format today, but why is it only at number 4? Well, because you're playing more engine pieces in the strategy, by nature you're going to be playing less non-engine, and hand traps in this format are so incredibly important, and the fact that you can't play as many in Fire King Snake Eye as you could in pure Snake Eye definitely hurts. Now this deck does have an advantage over the pure Snake Eye counterpart, and that's going to be that if any back row heavy decks come into the format, it's going to have a much better time, because cards like Garunix and Kieran are incredibly powerful at offering removal for the strategy too. It can pretty quickly get to negation in the form of Arvada, but also has a lot of the classic endboard pieces in obviously Snake Eye Slamber's Dragon, IP Masquerena, Promethean Princess, and so much more. But my concern with Fire King Snake Eye is going to be, are you better off playing that deck or pure Snake Eye? And most of the time the answer is going to be you're better off playing a more pure variant of the Snake Eye strategy. Fire King Snake Eye is still very good and definitely will be a top tier threat, but the reason why it's at number 4 instead of higher on the list is because it just does fewer unfair things in the game today. But that's not to say it couldn't top consistently in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! For the May 2024 format. Our number 3 best meta deck is going to be Branded, specifically Branded Despia. Resolving Branded Fusion is still incredibly powerful, I don't care what anyone says. If you can resolve that card, it is very likely you're going to win the game because it is such an insane single card for any single strategy. Branded is consistent, it's got great forms of recovery, and is easily able to put up multiple forms of interruption as well that are not going to be always just pure negation. You have Mirror Jade Banishes, you have Guardian Chimera Pops, you have Albion to get you into the Gimmick Puppet Nightmare lock, which is going to be insanely strong in this format because number 1, it is hard to interact with the Albion because it can't be targeted, and number 2, because if the Gimmick Puppet lock resolves, you almost guarantee yourself a win. Branded has a much better matchup against Snake Eye than a lot of other decks in the format do today, which means it's going to see a lot more play than other strategies. But it does have quite a few weaknesses that have to be addressed. First off, the deck itself has to play so much engine, which by nature means you either have to play a higher deck count than 40 cards, which will reduce consistency, or you play almost no non-engine to interrupt your opponent. And a lot of the time we're settling on basically both of those as Branded players. We'll be at 45 cards in the main deck and maybe have 3 or 6 pieces of non-engine, which is going to be not enough to consistently see it when you really want to. The second issue with Branded is that it's a deck that is weak to the same cards as Tenpai Dragon, another top 5 meta deck. The deck is really weak to cards like Dimensional Barrier and Symbol Archfiend, which means that those cards are going to see a lot of play because they do a lot of work against multiple different strategies, not just one. So as players prepare more for Tenpai Dragon, they're also preparing more for Branded. But the reason why I have Branded higher than Tenpai Dragon is because those cards that are good against both these strategies are really only that good when the player is going first. If Branded is going first, they can handle that, and Branded wants to go first, unlike Tenpai, which wants to go second. That gives the opponent the opportunity to set up these powerful floodgates against that strategy, which Branded just doesn't happen to do as often. And Ash Blossom does have an argument for being the best hand trap in the game today, which means it's still going to see a lot of play. And while it used to really destroy Branded in general, it's not always going to be the case anymore because the deck has ways to play around it, with cards like Triple Tactic Thrust and Diffusion Duplication, or a card like Crossout Designator, even Nadir Servant to go into a different line are all ways to play around Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. But even with all that, Branded is able to set up a really crazy end board with powerful boss monsters, consistent recovery tools, and even allowing itself to do some unfair things, especially when Branded Lost is on the field. While Branded is not the best deck in the room, I would choose it ahead of almost any other strategy in the game today. Moving on to our number 2 best meta deck, it's going to be Voiceless Voice. Voiceless was released back in Phantom Nightmare, and when it was released, I always thought it would be a good deck, but I never assumed it would be one of the top 2 or 3 best strategies in the game. But I was proven wrong. This strategy is crazy, and the new card from Legacy of Destruction, Blessing of the Voiceless Voice, makes this strategy so much better than it once was. The deck has ways to get to its engine pieces quite consistently thanks to Pot of Prosperity, Pre-Preparation of Rites, and even Diviner of the Herald. But the deck is also able to play a ton of non-engine, at least 15 to 18 spots for it at the minimum. It's one of the few best decks in the game that has an Omni Negate ready at its disposal in Skull Guardian. The fact that Barone and Savage Dragon were banned means all the other decks are playing at a disadvantage when it comes to Voiceless Voice because of the negation that it has. It's also got great ways to protect its resources. Think of a card like Barrier of the Voiceless Voice. Giving you targeting protection for your light monsters is really good, and making it so your opponent has to attack into the Skull Guardian, which is a huge attack stat when Low is on the field, is a massive deal. And then we have Radiance's Destruction and Summoning effects, which are really solid, and of course Blessing is basically exactly what the deck asked for when it comes to recovery and of course additional summoning. And while a pure Voiceless Voice has performed very well, we're starting to see a couple people innovate a little bit by adding in a branded package and even a melodious package as well, which allows the deck to create one of the scariest end boards in the game today if left uninterrupted. Voiceless has so much going on, and I didn't even mention Seravis giving the deck targeting protection, but also giving a way to just negate summons in general, which is a huge form of interruption as well. Voiceless Voice is an awesome deck, and to me it's the second best deck of the format. And finally, our number one best meta deck is going to be Snake Eye. But which version of Snake Eye? Well, right now there are three versions of Snake Eye I want to talk about in this section: Pure Snake Eye, Melodious Snake Eye, and Kashtira Snake Eye. All three of these strategies performed very well at YCS Rio, and I believe will continue to perform well in the coming weeks. But before I get into that, let's talk a bit about the Snake Eye cards. They've been around for a couple of months now, and honestly they are not going away anytime soon. Pretty much every single card is easily accessible and gives you additional advantage by being a +1 in almost every single situation. And because almost every card in the deck is a starter, you have to have an equal amount of hand traps or more to beat the deck consistently. If they do manage to go uninterrupted, their end board can be absolutely insane, with cards like Bestial Dispatter for a monster negate or destruction, and of course Cyframe Lord Omega to rip 2 cards out of the hand. You have Promethean Princess to deal with in the graveyard, as well as Flamber's Dragon and IP Masquerena on field as well, with a fully loaded graveyard of level 1 fire monsters to revive and get additional advantage for the following turn. It's insane how good the deck is and what monsters it can just summon out. And I didn't even mention the fact that you can easily set up the Salamangreat Raging Phoenix OTK as well. Now, while Pure Snake Eye is very good, Melodious Snake Eye is honestly really strong too. With just a small Melodious engine, you can go for a combo that ends you on a copy of Appaloosa with multiple negates to protect your Snake Eye strategy before you even normal summon. The Kashtira version is also really powerful because it gets you extra bodies on the field to use for synchros or even link material. But you're also able to use the powerful effects of Unicorn and Fenrir to disrupt your opponent and make it so they have a harder time to break your board. Ripping cards out of the extra deck with Unicorn or disrupting the graveyard with something like Birth can all be really good in this format today, and most decks don't have a way to deal with both of them consistently. If I had to rank these strategies in terms of which is the best way to play Snake Eye, I would say Pure Snake Eye is number 1, followed by Kashtira Snake Eye, and then Melodious Snake Eye at number 3. But honestly, you can't really go wrong with any version of Snake Eye in the format today. But let me know what you think about these decks down in the comments below, and if there are any other decks you think I missed. While you're down there, make sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed the discussion, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Check out my sponsor, Imperium Duelist, and use code OSHEA10, OSHEA10 for 10% off your order. And of course, follow me on Twitter and join the Discord server, both of which are linked in the description. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.